So the Americans open up 1776 with a minor campaign, allowing them to move two generals. They move Arnold into Montreal. The feeling there being they don't want the Brits to reinforce Montreal. I think it counts as a port, so they could have landed their big reinforcements and a general there and prevent the conquest of Canada. So Arnold wanted to move fast there. The Americans grabbed the initiative on that. Second thing is Washington marched into Long Island against Cornwallis. Now Cornwallis only had one strength point, Washington had three. Nobody played a card. Cornwallis had pretty much hung up his hat and said, okay, there's going to be another French alliance point. That sucks, but I really can't do anything about it. The Americans also were sitting on the, I'm going to win this war. I think the modifier was around +3. The die roll went against the Americans very badly, and they lost by a point. Then the casualties roll. Cornwallis took no casualties. Washington took 2, so he's down to 1 strength point now. And it was a pretty major victory for Cornwallis. Totally outfoxed Washington. Washington's got to get some troops down there or he's in danger now. So both sides reinforced their position in the New York City area. Cornwallis is up to 5 strength points there in Long Island, and Washington took 3 extra strength points, so he's up to 4. Now this does bring up one of the other real historical bother points for me. The English, at least early in the war, very much wanted to force a major single battle to decide the cause. Yes, they have the regulars, which gives them a slight bonus on that. But for the most part in this game, I don't think they want that. Because the risk of losing a battle for the Americans is about nil. One great battle, unless it's Washington, unless you defeat and kill Washington, isn't going to change the game. So, granted, this is a situation where Washington could conceivably be killed, but his army's a little too big. We've got, I'm trying to cut back on them. The maximum losses that he can take in a battle are 3. He's got 4 strength points. He will not be killed in a battle. He's not small enough. Now, the British could say, okay, I got to win 2 battles then. 2 battles is harder than 1. So other effects are more valuable. So even though I have Cornwallis sitting there, who's got, the 2 activation ratings that I could get him moving, and the Brits really don't want to fight this battle. Now, the Americans, on the other hand, do want to fight battles. And I don't know how terribly accurate that really is. Largely, they were busy trying to get an army together at that point. Now, okay, let's go to what happened after the reinforcements, because that's something that bothers me, is that, the whole Burgoyne plan was based on that. Combining to try to force one single battle and just win the Northeast that way. Cut the New England area off. Going over, Howe marched in to Lexington, Concord. His plan to try to grab Rhode Island and maybe Connecticut by basically surrounding those American forces somehow. However, he had to leave Boston to do this. Maybe he should have left the strength point behind. That's something I'm beginning to realize. Garrisons are important here. He doesn't have a lot of strength points, though, so that seemed like an iffy idea. By leaving Boston, the Americans were able to play a 1-ops card and remove his... actually, no, not a 1-ops card. Where did they play? Did I forget to play it? Not a 1-ops card. They threw an event that they didn't want in order to remove control of Boston. That 1-ops card may belong in their hand. I may have done that by mistake. Alright. So the Americans played the Cortez SC, French and Spanish aid, increases the French alliance. Howe looked at his hand and said, oh boy, sitting here without control of Boston anymore, it doesn't look like he has an easy way to get these isolated. So he played a 3-ops card, which is needed to move someone as excellent as Howe, and charged into New York. Now, granted, I could have moved Cornwallis instead, no question. But moving Howe in, he's got a slightly better battle rating with that big 6. And he engaged Washington. Washington played Light Horse Harry Lee, giving him a +2 bonus, which also gives him a draw. And the English were able to throw away an event that they didn't want. They kind of wanted to fight just to get rid of an event, among other things. And that puts them down a card, yeah. So, the big effect, because it was a 1 strength point difference in the combat, Washington stood because he had the good event card for battle. The roll-off for leader effectiveness, Washington failed, Howe succeeded. So Howe had like 10 strength points to Washington's 6 when you include leader effectiveness. And it was a pretty major swing, like 3 to 4 point bonus for the Brits in the end. So the Brits actually won the battle. They took a casualty but caused 2 to Washington. And, you know, things look kind of good for them down there. They still want to get Cornwallis off Long Island because it's cold there. Washington grabbed some more reinforcements. He's up to a 5 strength point unit now, I believe. I guess he only lost 2. And Cornwallis marched down to Philadelphia, dispersing the Continental Congress. That will make it harder for the American player to play new political control markers. They can still flip them where the general is sitting, but they can't actually place new ones. So Washington ended up marching back down to Philadelphia, and defeating Cornwallis in a very close battle. It was turned by the militia, as it were. It was a 1-point swing, and that was in the favor. This was the winter offensive. He had a +2 total, actually, to his battle rating. Both leaders failed at their succeed in being good generals role. All right. So here we just ended the second turn. We're into 1777. Don't have the Declaration of Independence yet. Let's see what happened. All right. Well, the first thing is, let's look at Cornwallis here. He's been driven back to Monmouth. His only options to retreat were Monmouth and Reading, neither of which is a pleasant area, so he suffered winter attrition. That was 2 strength points down, and that's bad. The next aspect, after winter attrition, and the Americans lost their 1 dude in Charleston, is, and of course, Arnold lost another strength point. His army's dissolving up there, but he did conquer all of Canada. Even if there's areas of Canada that he didn't take, it counts as conquer. The political control phase, this is what we kind of have as a position. We see New Jersey and New York have both swung to neutral. There's equal number of colonies controlled by both sides. That means nobody's going to get the militia. Massachusetts has gone pro-Tory, however. And I guess that's about it there. And I think that's it for this turn. Nah, that isn't quite it. The Continental Congress reconstituted down here in Abingdon, Virginia. Alright, now that's a big gripe, actually. They, of course, could have gone in Philadelphia, but there's no restriction. They can go anywhere within the 13 colonies that's not British controlled, essentially. Putting it in some really out-of-the-way place that nothing can get to is no big deal. Well, this guy has to make a couple of checks. He might have died either winter. Yeah, he's gone. There's something completely unreasonable to me to the capital moving out here in Virginia. I was initially considering Fort Stanwix, which, to tell you the truth, is pretty iffy in and of itself. But we're talking about near the Western Territories here. Yeah. Anyway, that's about it. So the Americans forced the Brits to go first, and the Brits started out throwing some reinforcements into play. Burgoyne up in Boston. The Americans responded, or followed up, with von Steuben, giving Washington a couple more strength points, but more importantly, getting rid of the regulars bonus for the Brits. Brits discarded a card and took Springfield. Americans then played their own reinforcement card, putting Lafayette down in Richmond, where he's seriously threatening Carleton's force. And then the Brits played the large Sandwich coastal raids, taking Quebec into neutrality, which removes Canada. And they also grabbed Baltimore at the same time with that. Lafayette moved in and defeated Carleton at Norfolk, raising the French alliance a little higher. And we have a deadline now, 1781, which isn't that far in the future. The other aspect the Brits played, or an important one, the Brits played a royal amnesty, taking away Westchester and Albany from the Americans. Right now, New York State's fallen Tory. We got Massachusetts Tory. Slowly, the British are beginning to create a powerful position here, as well as one in the South. The Americans got to get a couple of card plays in a row after, I don't remember what the Brits did. I think they sealed off New Haven, but then the Americans got a couple plays in a row, one of which was they grabbed Quebec back, and therefore they have Canada, and they managed, they also grabbed Hillsborough, and then they moved into Springfield to try to save these forces. The New Haven play was in between those. The final play for the Americans was to replace the North's government faults with the 1781. Those are forced cards, so the only thing that was affected was the order they were played. The British didn't see 1781 as terrifically valuable to them. The Americans saw no reason not to hold this for a while. They wouldn't have played it as their last card, probably, but once the Brits were out of cards, it really didn't matter. Clean these up and finish up the turn. And there we are moving into 1778. Alright, not a lot fell during the political control phase. The American holdings in Rhode Island and Connecticut were kept alive by the move to Springfield. We're seeing a lot of British territories that are kind of not under great control. So, for example, Fort Detroit and Fort Niagara, it only would take a couple of plays, but each one could only be done individually to seal that off. Over here at Ticonderoga, that could fall immediately. I'm not quite sure why the Americans haven't expended a couple of pieces to remove that. It's kind of a thorn in their side being there. They're concentrating, though, on the big points down in the south. Ticonderoga isn't really hurting them at this point, although the Brits could expand it into either New Hampshire or New York. New York it looks like there's more important ways to hold it. And speaking of which, I think New York's British now. So taking that out might be well worth it at this point. You only have so many actions. As this date gets closer, though, we have to worry a lot more. Just how many colonies do you control? All right, I'm going to wrap this one.